Welcome back to the Pathways to Happiness podcast. My name is Nena Lavonne. I'm a life coach that specializes in personal development, mindset, and life transformation. And today we're going to be talking all about coping with and truly learning to embrace the change in our life. So before we get into it, I just wanted to, as always, take a moment to really thank you for your support both here and on the Nena Lavonne YouTube channel. You are an amazing audience, and I really enjoy your comments and insight more than you know. Thank you also for giving me such great feedback on the question and answers podcast. It sounded like you really enjoyed the format, so we will definitely be doing more of these in the future. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into today's topic because I just have so much to say about it. So we all know, at least mentally, that the only constant in life is change. It's something we hear all the time. As humans, however, we expend a tremendous amount of time trying to avoid change at any cost. We would much rather deal with a downgrade or keep something that's actually mediocre in our life than be confronted with change. So we're always kind of living in what I call damage control mode. We are just trying to kind of muddle through what we've got right now because we're afraid of life forcing us into something that's new or unfamiliar. So it doesn't matter if you complain about your job every single day of your life. The second it's in jeopardy, you cling to it like it's the best thing that ever happened to you and that no other job could possibly make you as happy. So we don't consider how change could lead to an upgrade ever. We would much rather stick with what we know and really hold on to it at all costs. But in life, we just deal with so many changes. We have changes to our relationships, to our health, to our job. We have changes in our community and in society. Some changes are under our control and some definitely are not. People that learn to successfully cope with change really flourish in life and use change as opportunities for growth or inspiration. When we fail to do that, however, we can be completely overcome with sadness, confusion, fear, and anxiety. We feel like our world is crashing and that there is really nothing for us to hold on to. A lot of this happens because we are programmed to think of change in the same way we think of loss, or that change really is loss, that it doesn't really matter what good has happened. If it changes now, that it was all meaningless, or we want to somehow alter the path of our life now so that we can find something that's going to stay forever. And we know that that isn't really a possibility, or even something that in reality would be positive for us. But change feels like something is being stolen from us, even when it's just the natural progression of life. I see this all the time with parents who cry every time their child does a birthday. Not happy tears, but tears that are coming because they feel like a situation is ending, that time is passing, and that change is coming. So we all have this natural habit to mourn change instead of celebrate it. It's a theme we can see in our society over and over and over. Even with little things, we don't even want to change insignificant things like what we pick on a menu or what station we're going to get our news. Usually we're thinking that if something is familiar, that it is good. And believe me, I was definitely one of those people. I think for me, it was mainly because I thought I was really happy with my life, and I think that's basically because I had designed it. I felt that I had everything that I wanted or that I needed. So I was really constantly in fear that something was going to go wrong somehow. So I was always looking over my shoulder, scared of even the possibility of change, because I was convinced that my life was exactly how I wanted it to be and that any other possibility was going to be a disaster. Now, of course, much later I realized that I was not leading a perfect life at all, but there's no way you could have convinced me of that at that time. Without realizing it, I was just living in fear all the time. And no change was even really happening for me at that time, but I was torturing myself constantly just thinking about that possibility. But to be honest, change did come, and big time. There were so many huge changes that came, I don't even know where to begin. My life is not even recognizable from even 5 years ago. So I have been there. I get it more than you could ever imagine. I have, however, in this process completely changed my attitude about change, and I have learned to truly welcome and embrace change into my life. I have also learned firsthand what a gift change can be, and how, when we're able to let go of fear, how we can really embrace new opportunities. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about why change is so hard, why it scares us, and then how not only to cope with change, but how to use it to really upgrade your life and ultimately make you a happier and more fulfilled person. So, first, let's talk about fear. Now, all fear is pretty much all rooted in the same thing, and that is that we aren't going to be able to handle whatever it is that's going to happen to us. So, whether it's a lion charging at us in the wild or being told that our services are no longer needed at our job, it doesn't matter. We fear these situations because we do not trust we are going to be able to cope. We don't know how we are going to manage the situation or how we will be able to move on. Another problem is that we are always judging potential changes and assuming that any other outcome other than the specific one we're holding on to is going to be worse. Everything that is not what it is right now is automatically less desirable to us than whatever we have going on now. We feel that all change is painful and that it's kind of stealing something from us in some way, that it's taking something precious from us. We also assume that the way we have our lives set up now and the choices that we have made are the best possible options and choices available. We never consider that the universe might have some better ideas or that our life might actually improve dramatically if we go with the flow and start to welcome some of the changes, because our brains do the exact opposite. So we anticipate what we think will happen in whatever change is being presented, and we immediately write a whole mental story about it. We judge it as bad before we even give it a shot mentally, let alone experience it in real life. So we make this horrific picture of what we think it will be, and it is bad, really bad. It doesn't matter how illogical it is. Once we have made that mental picture, we are done. It is there. We really check out because we are terrified. We can immediately think of 1,000 things that could go wrong with this scenario. And we really fixate on all the bad things that we believe are going to happen because of this change. I'll give you an example from one of my clients. Now, she has a daughter who is really shy, and she describes her as socially awkward. She was having some different specific issues in the school she was going to, and it was suggested to her that they move her to a new school that had some accommodations that they thought might actually be really helpful to her. So they felt this new school would be much better for her in the long run. So when my client heard about this, she completely panicked. So firstly, she resisted the change 100% and did everything she could to try to prevent this from happening. She put her foot down and ultimately said, "No way, my daughter can't handle this, so we are not even going to consider this." Now, she had not even asked her daughter at this point. She just assumed it was a terrible idea, and she was completely overcome with anxiety. Now, a few days later, the school guidance counselor spoke to the daughter and made the same suggestion. And it turns out that the daughter was much more agreeable and actually thought it might be a good idea herself. So, long story short, she did transfer to the different school and is absolutely loving the experience. And she's thriving in the new environment. She embraced the change. It was actually the best thing for her. So it was a complete upgrade, but the thought of the change to my client was so unbearable that it almost never came into fruition because there was just so much resistance. And I see this again and again and again with career changes, with relationships ending, you name it, doesn't matter. Always the situation is assumed to be something that we should avoid at all costs. We have to realize that so much of this is just in our heads. Take a moment to think about a huge change from your own past that terrified you. Really envision it for a moment, something that really you heard about and you were just petrified. Now, think about the reality of what happened. Was it as awful as you thought it would be? Probably not. Did you gain something from it in the end? Well, almost definitely. But we aren't trained to think about it this way. We are trained instead to live our life on repeat. We are completely creatures of habit. I say this all the time. We really have the same thoughts in our mind 95% of the time, which leads us to have the same habits and the same behaviors and the same routines and rituals in our life all the time. And it's something that started to provide a lot of comfort for us. Now, it doesn't matter if it's something that is ultimately good or bad for us. We really crave the security that that routine offers for us. But we cannot rely on stability ever because it's always an illusion. There is no way to go through your life without experiencing change. Change will happen whether we resist it or not. And the fact is, when we try to hold on to things this way, we're often, in reality, trying to hold on to something that no longer exists except in our mind. Things often have already changed. Things are changing all the time. It's our resistance to change that really keeps us from seeing that. It's true, however, that we are human beings, and just because we understand it would be better to be able to think about things one way as opposed to another way, it doesn't mean that we can make that shift right away. We have to learn to really break our old habits and create new thought patterns. It does not happen overnight, but it definitely does happen. If we want to change how we think, we actually can change how we think. So, how do we learn to cope with change and become more resilient? There's actually a lot we can do to help ourselves out and start to really rewire our brain to understand that change itself is not inherently good or bad. It's just our perception. And if we can learn to perceive it in a more positive way, the more we're going to find that we aren't suffering as much or at all. We can learn to be excited about change and see it as a fresh new page with endless possibilities. So, how do we actually do this? The first part of the process really is learning to accept the situation. A lot of times we say we've accepted the situation, but it's just words. We have to actually accept the situation. Now, there are two types of change that can happen in our life. There are changes that we agree to make and that we have some kind of control over. And then there are changes that happen that we don't want to happen. These are things that we can't actually control. So it's a matter of accepting the things that we cannot control or that we have no say in, and for the things that we do have control over, learning to be a little bit more optimistic about these changes. So we need to really get real about what the change actually means instead of catastrophizing the situation, which, as again, human beings is often, human nature. We think the worst at all times. So we want to accept that change and see it for what it actually is without creating some kind of story about it. The second thing we can do is to really give ourselves an opportunity to get our emotions out. A lot of times when we really bottle our emotions in, they fester and get bigger and bigger. But if we can really express ourselves, sometimes just allowing these emotions to be heard helps to kind of silence them or lessen their intensity. So you can write in a journal or you can talk it over with friends and family, but you definitely want to express yourself. You don't, however, want to continuously be talking about this. You want to express yourself, but then you want to give yourself the opportunity to really move on. So if we are constantly bringing up, there is very little chance we're going to be able to successfully take steps forward. So we want to make sure that our emotions have been expressed and heard, and then we want to, again, give ourselves the chance to really move on with our life. Another thing that is important during times of change is remembering to focus on your self-care. We know in high stress situations, oftentimes we forget to take care of ourselves, both mentally and physically. So we want to make sure we're really keeping up with both. Of course, with our physical health, we're talking about making sure that we are sleeping enough, that we are eating well, and that we are exercising, because if we fail to do these things, it's only going to really aggravate the situation because we are not going to be feeling well to begin with. We need to also make sure we are really keeping up with our emotional health and really taking a good look at how we are feeling on a regular basis and, doing different things to foster our mental health, such as meditating and making sure that we have enough time alone to really reflect with ourselves. We have to understand also that even changes that are positive can still cause stress for us. So we just want to make sure that we are taking great care of ourselves during these times in our life. Something else that is enormously helpful is focusing on being in the present moment. Now, if you're a subscriber to the Nena Lavonne YouTube channel, you know that we recently did a video about mindfulness. And the concept of mindfulness is simply to be in the present moment and to be really, truly experiencing the here and now. So often what happens with change and the fear of change is that we are living in the past. So of course, we're going to have a lot of anxiety about the present or the future because we want to just recapture what we used to have before. We want to kind of relive it over and over. And the problem with that is that it really steals away the beauty of what we have going on in this moment. We're, not even focused on that. We don't even notice what's happening in the present moment, and it could be extremely good. But we are focused on the past, or we are just worried about the future. So if we can learn to practice mindfulness and really bring our focus to the present moment, we can experience it and we can have more control over our perspective. So we are really designing our reality as we go. But we need to be in this moment to be able to really do that. Now, the next thing we can do is more on a practical level, but I found it's really very helpful to many of my clients, and that is to try as much as possible to maintain the other parts of your schedule or of your life. So what I mean by that is, even though one aspect of your life might be changing, you want to try, if possible, to continue to do some of the things that are still comforting or familiar to you. So if you know that usually on Fridays you go with your friend to lunch, or you have some kind of ongoing weekly thing or monthly thing, you want to go ahead and try to keep up with those things as much as you can. And that just seems to make the changes seem a little less stressful because it reminds you that it's just that one aspect of your life that is changing. You are not changing as a person. Your world is not changing. Just one aspect of your life is changing. So that's definitely something that I find can be very, very helpful to a lot of people. Another thing that you can do is to actually sit down and brainstorm all the positives that could come into your life because of this change. Usually we are so focused on the negatives that we don't really even consider these possibilities, but they are always, always, always there. So you just want to go ahead and list them out and think of any potential good factor that could come out of this. And you're going to find that there is a lot. Now, most of these things are going to be external things, but you can also use this as an opportunity to think of what significant internal changes that could take place. What way are you going to need to become a better version of yourself because of this change? So there's always good things that are going to happen. So you want to provide yourself with an opportunity to really allow yourself to consider what they might be, kind of fantasize, go to the other direction. We've spent a long time, really catastrophizing and envisioning the worst possible scenarios. Let's think about the best case scenarios for one time. And you're going to find that this helps us to actually get excited about the change. Another practical thing that you can do is to be proactive and to plan something positive that's related to the change. So let's say the new change involves a big move to another state. So plan a trip to the local museum or to, a new exciting restaurant. Or if it is a difficult change or a loss, plan something that makes you feel positively in the moment, such as a pedicure or, taking yourself out to the movies. But take a moment to just prove to yourself that there are positive things that can be associated with this change. It's also very important that you offer yourself love during this time. You need to understand that we are not robots. We are going to feel emotions no matter how much preparation that we make, how much, we understand that change can be positive. It is the reality that we will be faced with some emotions that will probably make us uncomfortable. And we have to comfort ourselves and offer ourselves love and understanding during this time. In life in general, we have to learn the skill of really being a good friend to ourselves. So often we are so hard on ourselves. We are harder on ourselves than we are to any other person most of the time. So really breaking this cycle and, embracing self-love as well as self-care is really going to be very appreciated and necessary during this time. And another thing that we can consider if this change really is too much for us is to go ahead and seek support if you need it. Find a support group, find a friend that might, be understanding or has gone through something similar. Think about a family member that might be understanding, or you can always go to a therapist. But you never want to make yourself feel guilty for getting the support that you need. It is always okay to reach out for help. And know also that just like all situations change, emotions change also. So even if you are feeling very anxious or completely overwhelmed or overcome with grief because of this change, you are not always going to feel this way. No matter what, eventually you are going to feel better and you are going to adapt to this change and you will eventually thrive and flourish with this change. So we have to remember that we can't avoid change, but we can learn to be resilient and learn to see change and transitions as new opportunities. Life is fun. Life is beautiful. Yes, life can be painful, but it does offer us contrast. Just like a roller coaster, we're not going to appreciate the highs without the lows. Life is never going to be even. It's never going to be just flat. There's always going to be hills and valleys, and we can learn to see the beauty in that, or we can create a tremendous amount of sadness and heartache in our life. So I invite you to see the beauty. I invite you to allow yourself the space you need to grow as a person and to learn to trust the universe. There are multiple happy endings to your story, so don't let yourself be attached to one single outcome. There are miracles and opportunities that you have not even considered waiting for you if you allow yourself to really embrace them. So if you are going through a period of time in your life that is full of change, I just want to offer my support during this time and let you know that you will get through this. You are not only going to get through this, but your life in the end is going to be even better. You're going to be filled with more wisdom and more ability to cope with situations. So you will be able to further embrace change as it comes to you. So please do reach out to me if you have a question that you would like to be answered, or you have something that you feel you would like to have expanded on. You can always find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at Nena Lavonne, and that's spelled Nenalavonne. Or you can send me an email to nena.lavonne@gmail.com. Like I said earlier, I will definitely be doing another question and answers podcast. So go ahead and get those questions to me and I will add them to the list. And I truly hope today's podcast was comforting and inspiring to you. So I thank you so much for spending time with me today. I look forward to spending time with you next time, and I truly hope your day is absolutely extraordinary.